You got this guy who's basically rolled in with a sledgehammer, and then the question is what happens next. And I think what happens next is children get separated from their parents at the border, and the Department of Health and Human Services can't figure out whose parents or which belong to which child. Or Puerto Rico gets hit by a hurricane and they can't figure out how many people were killed. Or on tax day, the IRS computers shut down. And you're seeing this, I think, very slow moving and therefore very kind of hard to attend to crisis.
Best-selling author Michael Lewis yesterday on Morning Joe listing the very real impacts from the lack of experience in all corners of the Trump administration. High on that list, immigration, and a pair of new DHS reports from the Office of the Inspector General on just how badly that incompetence played into the family separation crisis at the border. And joining us now, MSNBC correspondent Jacob Soboroff, who's been on the story from the very beginning. And you wonder, Jacob, maybe you can tell us, is it incompetence leading to inhumanity or just plain inhumanity at this point?
What I have to tell you, Mika, is basically these two new reports confirm the horrifying details that you and I and Joe and all of us have talked a lot about. And unfortunately, I got to see with my own eyes. It took the administration months to get there, but this Department of Homeland Security Office of Inspector General report, the first one, basically says the administration was not prepared for this family separation policy, and sort of the practices that they put into place made this policy far worse. We heard a lot about kids not being in cages. Well, the report says not only were kids in cages, but they were in these cages for longer than the 72-hour period that anybody is supposed to be kept in these Border Patrol holding cells. We were told in this report that the computer database that the administration said was supposed to be there in order to reunite these children and keep track of them never actually existed in the first place. And we were told as well that the idea that people were being turned away from ports of entry and then going and crossing illegally because of administration policy wasn't true. Well, it turns out that also was true. So with all these lines that we got fed from the administration over the summer, this report basically tears apart. And then just quickly, I want to talk about this other report that also came out on the same day about the nation's largest private immigration detention facility. It's called Adelanto, and it's here in Southern California. Just really sickening stuff. I've also been inside that facility. Probably the worst detail of that one is nooses were found inside detainee cells, and we know that separated fathers, many separated fathers, were actually held inside this facility. Inadequate medical care, inadequate detention facilities, and increasing segregation, isolation for these people. We're looking at some of those nooses there. I got to actually go inside there and talk to one of the separated fathers that was inside Adelanto just a few weeks ago. And take a look at this, Mika. This is what he told me. You say you're happy, but you've spent months here in detention in Adelanto. Had you known and not signed this, you could have been back together with your son much earlier. You're sitting here in your orange jumpsuit, in your prison clothes, with your wristband, What is it like to be here? I mean, how do you feel to have been here all summer?
I feel like, why did they deceive me with this paperwork? They didn't explain exactly what it was. I wouldn't have suffered all this time being separated from my son.
And, that's one story. There are over 2,600 stories of kids being separated. These conditions are things we reported all summer long, and now this is America. This is what we're hearing from the Donald Trump administration.
Yamiche.
These two reports tell us that the Department of Homeland Security wasn't ready for this child separation policy, and that the conditions were terrible inside some of these facilities. But what does these two reports tell you about what could be going on now with hundreds of kids who were moved into these tents in Texas where there's no schooling and no legal separation, no legal representation?
Yeah, so, Yamiche, what you're talking about is Tornillo, that giant tent city down on the border in Texas. I was just down there a week and a half ago, and the population in that facility is exploding, and that is because, again, of the policies of the Trump administration that intimidate parents, many of whom are undocumented, from picking up their children from these detention facilities. Tornillo, as we reported way back over the summer as well, is on federal property. It's at the port of entry there, which means that facility is not required to have state and local inspections like other Health and Human Services facilities. So the children that are in there are not subject to the same oversight, the same rules and regulations, and the quality of care that they might get elsewhere. So lots of questions still about that facility. I think there's about 1,600 kids there today that we don't know the answer to.
Jacob Soboroff, thank you very much for staying on this. Thank you very much. Willie?
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.